The title of today's lecture is Workplace Harassment, Violence, and Psychological Disability: The Need for Justice. The good news is a very compassionate system. There was a time where if you couldn't work because you were disabled, you lost an arm or a leg, or you were extremely depressed, no one cared. Either you worked or you starved. If you're fortunate, you had society to help you, or back long enough, the tribe looked after you. But there's a history of people becoming disabled at work and not having an income, and therefore not being able to work, have gainful employment, not being able to support their families, becoming homeless and starving. The good news is we now have insurance policies to cover that. In the state of California, for example, we have a state disability. People actually pay into that. It's not a lot. It comes to maybe $50 a year. That's what it used to be. Or if a person has a more permanent disability, they can apply for SSI. Or the person may have a private disability policy they've been paying for through a health insurance. And thus, if they become disabled, and in this case, we're talking about stress-related disabilities, psychological disabilities. What kind of psychological disabilities are there that can interfere with a person's performing their job duties? Major depression is one. There's actually an impairment of concentration and memory. Often the person sleeps a lot or can't sleep. They're tired. They're not enjoying their lives. But particularly the concentration issue will interfere with the job function. They're not able to retain information. They're just preoccupied. They might have an anxiety disorder, a generalized anxiety disorder. Or there might have been a threat on their lives at the workplace and suffer from a post-traumatic stress disorder, in which case there's an actual aversion to being in the environment. It brings back flashbacks to the threatening event. The main cause that I see in my office of workplace disabilities has to do with harassment from management. Now, to a lesser extent, we see harassment from coworkers, but we see the bulk of what we see comes from harassment of management, and I'm going to be primarily addressing that today. You also have disabilities that are not related to work and the people's personal lives. They're just prone to depression. It could be a biological imbalance. It could be a marital issue, a divorce. That'll trigger off a major depression. That'll trigger off a severe anxiety reaction. So it could be from their personal life. Very often it's a combination. The person already has some stressors in their lives. They feel picked on by the supervisor. They're harassed just because of who they are, because of their gender, race, religion, national background. They'll just add to it. And sometimes not based on any of those facts, just their personality. It's just a conflict that happens. All disabilities that take place at work, psychological disabilities at work, if it's related to management, and you're dealing with a reasonably normal employee, typically, so I can't say all, but typically there's an abuse of power. When I went to a seminar at the National Institute of Health and I was presenting, and I was presenting on road rage, but then a part came up about workplace violence, the focus was on what factors predispose a worker to becoming violent in the workplace. And so they want to be able to screen people out who could become violent. I took the position that a great deal of the violence in the workplace is related to abuse of power from management. If management is fair, somebody may not like the decision, but they'll say, well, I don't like it, but it's fair. But if a person feels picked on, every time I do this, I'm a minute late, I get written up, but these other people do it and they don't get written up, that's not fair. Just as an example. Now you have cases where a person feels very alone with the harassment that takes place. You have cases of a supervisor or even a coworker sexually harassing someone.